And so, again, we are pleased to have Dr. Jesse Richman here, Associate Professor of Political Science at ODU, talking about politics. We talked about the national landscape of things. But here in Virginia, as you know, we are one of two states in the country that are going to have statewide elections later this year. And boy, are people paying attention to this race here in Virginia, particularly the historic nature of it. But things definitely heating up between gubernatorial candidates Abigail Spanberger and Republican Winsome Earle Sears. And Dr. Richman, your group just did a survey that came out in which you looked at the way people are looking at this race right now. And I want to ask you first, can you tell me a little bit about the survey? How many people may have been polled? How'd you go about it? And then we'll get into what you actually had in the findings.
So we surveyed about 700 people, a total of 1,718 surveys. This was looking at the Hampton Roads area. So the 7 cities of Hampton Roads were our focus. So this is a regional survey, not statewide. But nonetheless, I think it's got some interesting things to say about these races. We asked people about their views, and you can compare the proportions to how candidates have performed historically in the past in the region and get some benchmarks for what performance looks like in this region and what that has to say about the overall look of the election. The survey was done online this year, so we used some online panels. Increasingly, that's how social science surveys are being done. In the 2024 presidential election, Quinnipiac was basically the only polling outfit that was still doing primarily random digit dial telephone type surveys, and so that shift was in line with some national trends in terms of polling design and approach.
So we were talking before we came on
Yep.
about the findings that you all discovered and what stood out for you amongst those who responded to the polls. What did we learn from this survey?
So let me start with a couple of top lines. If we think about the gubernatorial race, Spanberger's doing considerably better than we saw McAuliffe doing in the same survey back in 2021. The difference is substantial enough, if that replicates statewide, that suggests Spanberger would be likely to win, likely to be ahead. We're able to then dig down a little bit in terms of how the division of support comes out. And I think one of the really interesting things is the challenge in the survey results that Winsome Sears faces in winning people who think Youngkin is doing a pretty good job as governor. She loses 12% of the people who strongly approve. She loses more than 30%. She only wins 40% of the people who approve of the job that Youngkin is doing as governor. And so this highlights the kind of the challenge of how do you get voters who like Youngkin to see this as a little bit more of a referendum on the Youngkin administration. How do you get them to return to or come to supporting the Republican ticket, given that they seem pretty happy with the Republican governor the state currently has?
So do we get any insight in the survey as to maybe why people might be leaning the way that they are, particularly, in that case, you're talking about the importance of Earle Sears being able to also captivate those who do find that Governor Youngkin has done a good job in the state. Does it go into that at all?
I think one of the key factors is the national element. So Youngkin's approval in the region is almost 50%. Trump's approval in the region is about 33%. And so there's a big gap there. And the connection's much tighter between Trump approval and plans to vote for Earle Sears than it is Youngkin approval and plans to vote for Earle Sears. So it's that national element that I think, is coming between the support. People don't like Trump, even if they like Youngkin, they're reluctant to vote for Earle Sears.
And it's interesting that you say that, because when I have conversations with others who are within the political spectrum and world, they are saying, hey, the reason why everyone's kind of watching what's going on in Virginia right now is because it kind of serves as a potential litmus test for how people feel about what's going on in Washington. Yep. And by you shaking your head, I'm going to imagine, yes, you feel similar. I mean, people, the interesting thing is people are not necessarily potentially going to the polls here, even in Virginia, and voting just for a Virginia candidate. They're expressing their thoughts potentially about how they feel the administration has done in Washington.
Yeah, one of the patterns that political scientists have noted over the recent decades is a trend towards, and this is a little weaker usually in governor's races than other places, but still this trend towards a nationalization of the party system, a pattern of people voting at the state level based upon their national party approval or disapproval, presidential approval or disapproval, as opposed to, and this used to be much more profound, especially in the South, where people would be voting one way at the national level, and then they might be voting quite differently at the state level. The state parties had their own kind of identity, and people sort of tuned into that, and they were assessing state politics based on those state parties and that state party identity, and that's fading. Again, it's a little stronger still at the gubernatorial than it is at the legislative level, even at the states, but there's still an important role for that national party viewpoint intersecting with the state politics.